Hey guys, Brad, good to see you.
Good to see you
Thanks
too.
for having us on. Excited to chat with you today, and certainly a pleasure to have you on. And Kimberly-Clark, such iconic brands, and so much going and so much success you guys have had, but certainly so much leaning in digital. Excited to get your perspective and experience on the topic, and talking about a couple of things and where the future is heading. I'm going to kick it off with a little bit of a broad one, but looking at the media landscape and kind of the future, where things are heading. Looking at the digital landscape is in kind of an interesting spot right now. eMarketer had some stats out that 74% of digital media in 21 was spent across the big three: Facebook, Amazon, and Google, which obviously they're doing a lot right, and they're big partners. But then there's also the rise of retail media and so much attention that's getting, and TikTok and other players who are coming up with really exciting activations. How are you looking at kind of current state in the future, balancing those dynamics, and so much weight being paid to such big partners who are doing it really, really well, but then also looking at some of the up and comers and making sure that you're keeping diversification?
Cool. Yeah. 74% is a lot for three. Definitely. We're not quite to that level with those three. I would imagine that a lot of that's probably driven by, long tail. A lot of small businesses rely on those platforms. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, future proofing, I mean, you do have to have, a good strategy and partnership with those three. I think if you want to be successful in the future, I don't think you need to be much of a futurist to know that those companies are going to be around for quite a long time and be powerful for a long time. So we certainly do, invest, I think a fair amount with those partners. We built joint business partnership agreements with all of them. And we're always looking to innovate and do new things, with them, right? So, I think when it comes to the balance side of it, I'm not too worried yet that we're over indexing on those partners. I really don't. I think that we've got a good level of spend with them. I feel fine about where we are. In fact, there's even some areas I'd like to see us, potentially grow a little bit more with them, to be honest. So on the balance side and thinking about the future, I think what is, there's like almost like another watch out to the other side of the coin, which is, anyone can look at the Lumascape too and see that there's thousands of players that are out there, right? And so how do you pick the right ones to bring the balance that you need to drive success on your business? And the way that we think about it is a couple of different ways. So beyond the big three that you mentioned, there are a lot of like really important, spaces where consumers are spending time. So even you've got audio platforms, social platforms, retail platforms, like you mentioned, gaming platforms, right? So, I think we tend to look at it as like, let's pick one or two of those. Again, it'll vary by brand, vary by market, and all those kinds of things. But if you can pick one or two of those to really sort of focus on and try to do good things with, that kind of, now you're already starting to kind of get to like, 10 partners that you work with, right? And I would say, like, kind of getting beyond that, you don't really want to go too much further, because what you find that you're doing is, leveraging a number of partners that might have capabilities in the same type of areas, and you're being kind of duplicative in how you're working, where you actually could be a little bit more focused. So we try to keep some, like, a breadth of partners that we work with, but also sort of like focus in the way that we do it. And then I'd say, like, some other things that we do too are, you definitely have to maintain like some budget for like true test and learn exploration with other types of partners, right? So we've done a virtual CES at Kimberly-Clark the last couple of years, invited a number of partners into those conversations with us, made some selections on test and learns that we want to do, and we always encourage folks to do that as well. Again, you want to like not go crazy and have a million different things going on, but if you kind of can align on, let's look at a couple that we feel are like the most pertinent, make some decisions and get some learnings and keep, growing in the space that way. That's important. And, and I guess, like, lastly, what we do too is just try to keep our message, inspirational to the brand teams. It's like, don't be overwhelmed by the choices that are out there. Don't be scared of it. Like, embrace it. We can kind of help you make focus media and marketing is an accelerant to the main base of your business. So like treat it that way. Like don't hang on to things too tightly. Let's be creative. Let's test and learn. Let's explore a little bit too. And even if like the measures of success may not be as clear as they are in some of those areas for things that are more tried and true and have been established for a long time, the learnings that you get are still going to be worth it.
Makes sense. Well, listen, if 2020 and 21 have taught us anything, it's to be agile and nimble. So I like that message. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of clicking into the digital landscape a little bit beyond players, thinking about device, and mobile's near and dear, obviously, to my heart, but also the dynamic of things in other markets, and with your global purview, a lot of really interesting things going on in APAC and things like that, kind of coming east to west, in certainly in mobile. How are you thinking about, mobile lens, or how do you, are you doing any type of device strategizing? And then, what are you seeing with that global lens that's really interesting in other markets, to where potentially on the device level that could or should come this way?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, in the last couple of years, it's been one of the biggest changes that has happened, right? I mean, is like the true shift to mobile dominant. I mean, when you're buying, programmatic, or you're buying social and everything, I mean, you just pretty much have to assume right now that the impressions that you're putting out there are going to be majority mobile. So I think we've kind of shifted away, like from a couple of years ago, like, well, what's your mobile strategy? It's like now it's just kind of like your mobile strategy is your strategy, right? You should be designing everything to be thinking mobile first, from the, you kind of have to make the assumption that if it's not something that you're, for sure showing on the big screen, that it's going to be something that's experienced on the mobile screen. So, we definitely, reinforce that with our teams to be thinking about, in terms of like how they design, design messaging, and make sure that things are, custom fit to platforms and all those types of things, and assuming that those platforms are going to be experienced in a mobile environment. So that's just kind of like the way of working now, right? So we don't really talk about mobile as a channel anymore. It's much more of just assume everything that we're doing is mobile, and let's just kind of be prepared for that. And then in terms of the second part of your question, and like, what are we learning from APAC? I mean, first of all, you're making me like realize that it's been like 2 years since we've really been able to go on a plane and travel around the world and see some of these things firsthand. So I feel like I'm missing a little bit, but we do stay pretty closely connected with our APAC team. And you're right. I mean, there's tons of exciting things that are happening there. I think, like, to me, the most notable difference, and as you kind of imagine like a future that's going east to west, is the way that their mobile platforms are designed to seamlessly integrate communities, content, and commerce in a way that we just haven't really seen here yet. But I completely believe is where the future is headed, right? And I think even looking at, Meta or Facebook and like a lot of the focus on the metaverse, I mean, that to me sort of feels like that, that is pretty much like what that world is going to be like, where all those things kind of, community, commerce, and content, and just kind of, sort of, blend in together, and you're able to, very easily make purchases within the environments that you're in, and make choices that way, like without kind of like leaving to go to a retailer, do these types of things, or just sort of choose the types of things that you want to do, will be interesting. I think it's going to be like, it's going to be Gen Z really that maybe tips it here. I don't think we haven't quite seen it yet in the West, but like Gen Z, just sort of seeing how they're coming up, the way that they've grown up even differently with technology from millennials, is going to be like just a huge, is going to drive the shift here. So I think it's actually pretty close, because Gen Z is like really just on the doorstep of having massive purchasing power, and I think that'll be cool to see. So that's what I look forward to seeing evolve. I think it's going to be fun to actually see it happen, because it's cool.
For sure, and I'm completely aligned with the Gen Z dynamic, and their loyalty is still somewhat up for grabs too, right? The only thing that, whether you're a platform, a provider, social, or the only thing they're loyal to right now is their phones. So it's going to be a great environment. And you spoke to the experience of engaging with consumers in new ways, community, commerce. what have you on their devices. It kind of leads me to the programmatic, and the science has gotten so good within the digital landscape, which is awesome. And it's certainly pushing smarter decisions and things forward. How do you think about another kind of balance question, but how do you think about the science aspect of it, and then the art and heart of connecting with consumers? Programmatic and all the science has gotten really good, and we're very regimented, and we have way better data than we did a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. How do you balance that science side of things and the art and heart of connecting with consumers?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Like I love talking about balance because I think it's it's the most important thing that you can do among like number of fronts in this business is to kind of think about the balance, because it can be very easy to tilt one way or the other. And so always kind of keeping a view on ROE across a variety of fronts is important. And yeah, man, like I totally agree that it's a great time from a science perspective. It's actually it's like funny to think about like how long the industry sort of like toiled under like really not having good insights about how stuff was working, right? I mean, there's like the famous quote that I don't even know if it was like from the 60s or the 70s, but like certainly when I got started in this business, it was like the old well, I know half my investment is working for me, I just don't know which half, right? And then everybody would like either laugh or sigh, kind of, depending on how glib or cynical you were, and go have a couple of drinks and kind of get back to work after that. But like now we actually do know, and that's fantastic. We have so much more perspective on what's working for us and what's not, and so that's a good space to be in. But kind of to your point, there's a risk in that too, and that like sometimes when we look too much at the numbers, it can be very easy to lose the sense of what's actually happening from a consumer experience standpoint, right? And it's like, just to give a really simple example of that is, you mentioned programmatic, right? Like I can use a purchase-based audience, like Nielsen-based, purchase-based audience who know what the behavior is. We know this is a prime prospect, and like, and find them and buy like a really low cost banner, again, showing up on a mobile that might even be like microscopic, and and it shows up as viewable, and so it kind of checks the box there, and it shows up as targeted and all those kinds of things. But like, and it's gonna, if you use the measurement, the science, it's really that gave you a great return on investment, a strong ROI, right? And so then you start to optimize to that, right? But it's like, and again, and it makes perfect sense because you're reaching someone who is a prime prospect, and the propensity naturally that for them to have ultimately bought something is pretty high. But then you have to stop and ask yourself, like, well, how much is what that little thing that we put in front of them might have that actually had to do with it? And it's like, probably not much. Like maybe it was all the other technology and the capability and the things that we've done and the way that we're optimizing that sort of made that look as good as it did. So you need to kind of take a pause at some point and say, well, what are we really putting in front of consumers? Because if we've continued to optimize on this like type of a thing, like how much of that are we doing? And it's like, we might have a great story from an ROI perspective, but is it really starting to make sense? And that, do we all really believe that that's actually changing, consumers, winning hearts and minds? Again, kind of going back to the art and the heart part, right? So, fortunately for us, I think we've done a lot of work around other engagement metrics, and there's still a lot more to go in that, but we've actually seen that like leading indicators of better ROI do tend to be higher impact, creative, better sizes. So we see drivers of like hover rates and engagement rates actually sort of paying off in ROI. So we do think about the experience that we have. And then it's even going like a step further, right? And so it's not only kind of getting back to the art and the heart part is, where I feel like there's a danger if you're not careful is you can start like numbers start to come out. And then again, I use like that one programmatic example of a tactic, but like there's a handful of them. And so you're doing all those things. Again, you feel pretty good. Like I got a balance, I'm doing a lot of different things. But again, if you take that step back and you really look like, are there other things that you're still missing? I mean, what are you not doing that you know that you should be doing, and then maybe because like the science isn't as like, doesn't give you a strong number on it. I mean, then to me this kind of comes to things about reaching multicultural and diverse audiences in meaningful ways, like leveraging influencers, like really thinking about how you're connecting in high quality content, and those types of things. So, again, where maybe like the science hasn't quite caught up in terms of like, the measuring the impact of those things as well as it can in some other areas that are a little bit more, automated, and kind of like, have like rigid rules and methods for calculating, but like, we all know that they're important, and it's like, so yeah, I mean, we absolutely, encourage our teams too to like, think about those things, and carve spaces out in your plans for having those types of engagements, because, there's also plenty of other learnings, even though they may not be like in the hard science realm, that like indicate that that's going to help you grow.
Makes a ton of sense. And yeah, want to be the first to test something, but prove to me it works, right?
Yeah, right, exactly right. Yeah. I'll only test it if I know it's going to work. Well,
yeah, right. And in the CPG landscape, it is still very much so. Yeah, you can't just go on performance metrics, because it's there's still a mass amount of purchasing. It's around 90% are still purchased in brick and mortar. So you've got to be playing a little bit of intent and awareness game.
Yeah, and you do have to have the balance. I mean, listen, I'm not, I completely empathize with our, brand teams. Like, there's a lot of pressure right now. I mean, this business environment that we're in, with, supply chain challenges and inflation, profits being squeezed and those kinds of things. I mean, even though, we're doing, I think, great from a foundational standpoint with our business, and, winning share and having a lot of things go great, like that pressure is still very real, and it makes it easy for people to kind of like just sort of default to some of the numbers and the analytics that come back, and kind of, and take, get behind those and feel comfortable in those, and kind of forget that there's actually a consumer experience on the other end that we need to make sure that we're taking care of.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I guess this falls in the line of getting those proof points and getting that data and some of those metrics. We consistently hear a lot of folks talking about in-housing dynamics and further media and the desire for first-party data, and in-housing for transparency, visibility, data access, things like that. Does that jive with Kimberly-Clark and your objectives? And what's your lens on in-housing and first-party data, and where you're heading?
Yeah. It fully jives. It fully jives with where KC is headed. There's huge benefits to client side ownership of tech platform contracts, marketing, advertising, technology relationships and contracts, both immediate and long term. So, we've been going down that road for at least like on that type of in-housing for over a year now. And then I think on a broader sense, of actually building in-house capabilities, like more through training and just capabilities, knowledge of how to sort of like get under the hood and use some of these things. We've been on that road for almost 3 years now. So, but what's interesting about it too is like I've also kind of learned going through this that you need to be mindful of how you talk about it, right? And it's even like the phrase in-housing, it can freak people out. That's like you say, hey, we're gonna move into in-housing, and people are like, we're not like nowhere near ready for that. Like, we can't hire all that type of a headcount and fire all of our agencies and this and that, right? And it's like, and so it's but like we're not really looking at it that way at all. Like, that's not what we're going to do, right? So we've actually kind of taken a mindset with it of not just saying in-housing but saying right housing, and to me that's about sort of strategic application of building capabilities and relationships that like ultimately enable us to get to where we want to go, which is more access to real-time insights and ability to respond in a more agile manner, right? And that's not about like our people pulling all, pushing all the buttons and flipping all the switches on those types of things, although we want them to know what kind of goes on behind the scenes on some of those things, and that's kind of the training part of it. But it's like, it's really, it's as much of a there's training components to it. There's contract, there's like just like the contract, even having like rights to access it, knowing what questions to ask. I mean, those are all things that are going to ultimately help you in terms of when you think about like that. To me, like that's what right housing is. It's like we just need to like not totally let all of this, sort of just be like, we hire people to kind of think about that for us. It's like, no, we need to be part of the conversation. We need to think about it like with them, because like ultimately like what we get out of it are going to be things that help us like drive our business and grow faster. So it's not just sort of like a, well, it's we want to take this on for the sake of taking it on, right? And like, and not pay somebody else to do it, like as some type of a potential cost efficiency type of a thing, but actually like an enabler of growth through better insights, understanding, and smarter activation. So that's, I think that if someone is kind of like getting started into this, right, I think that would be kind of like how I would encourage them to think about it, to sort of what is it that you're trying to get through, and then like what are a number of ways that you can actually start to help your company get better at that through maybe some contract ownership, maybe some training, maybe helping just kind of people understand like what actually are the capabilities of these platforms so they know what to ask for, right? And then maybe there's some other like hiring some new people that can actually spend the time to analyze the data yourself and have more conversations with your agencies about performance and things that are they're not easy always for our agency partners to be able to look at, because they're stretched and sort of focused on a lot of activation. So how do we work together, and how do our agency partners see like in-housing like not as a threat to their business, but actually like something that will help them, because instead of having to like spend so much time on like on one certain aspect of it, like now we can actually have more joint conversations around how we improve things together, and that's where the value that they bring can really help us, right?
I love the right housing. I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And reverse engineering, what do you want to get to? What do you want? What can you make actionable? And then reverse engineer, what do you need to get to do that? But that doesn't mean taking on all the practitioner work.
Yeah, and some,
right?
yeah, exactly. And there still may be, and there still are, especially when putting the global hat on. It's like there could be opportunities for some of the actual buying, right? I mean, we have plenty of markets where they have small budgets, and it's like maybe just a small like social plan or a search plan that they need to activate. And so and it may make more sense to actually bring like that type of a buy in-house, because now it's like you are paying an agency fee, and it's like, and it's someone who's going to like work on your business for only like a couple of hours out of to execute this thing, and is not really invested in it and those types of things. But it's like, if you actually knew how to do it yourself and had the access, like how much more learning out of that experience could you actually get, right? And again, so it's not just about the cost savings, but like you having sort of like control over the insights and the information that comes back on the performance, so that the next time a small campaign comes up, like you'll really know how to make it better.
Absolutely.
So there's a place for those types of things, but again, it's all about what is the right strategic opportunity to do it. Not just saying, well, we're going to be doing all of this by this time, like 3 years from now. Like that's not really our goal.
All right, that logical. I like that. Lastly, maybe not lastly, we'll see how much time we get through, but this is kind of a broad one. But how do you think, also very opaque, but changes in the media landscape, and you mentioned all the different arenas in our first as we kick things off. We talked about the different engagement options beyond the big three, but thinking about in-game and different environments for you to play and connect with consumers on. What's your view on the future of advertising, kind of in general, and what do you think will be the biggest changes we see in the near and not so distant future?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? It's again, if you would have probably asked somebody 15 or 20 years ago what the future is, it's it probably wouldn't look like it is today. It would, so it's hard for any of us to really know. But like, I guess as I kind of think about it, I still feel like we're in a bit of a transitional phase. Like we're somewhere between the old way that it used to be, and like in a future state that will be like very deconstructed from what we're in now, like even more, right? I mean, we're still this industry that trades on like very transactable like unit type communications, and there's and sort of like what an advertisement, right, as a thing. And so and obviously there's been some migration away from that, and there's a lot of creativity and great things that are happening, but like I still feel like we're only at the very beginning of what that actually could be, and that it actually, like 10 to 15 years from now, like we actually might be at a point where things have like deconstructed to a point, to such a level where it's, that those units are kind of more scarce, and you have to be more creative about, how you really engage with consumers. But it opens up all other types of opportunities in terms of, again, we kind of mentioned, communities before, and like kind of like that future world of the intersection of communities, content, and commerce, and like what well, how much more of our of our spend and support will be going into those things, like enabling things, advertisers more as of enablers of things for consumers, more than like interrupters of things of consumers, right? Like so I feel like there's to me it's like the future is going to be very different from what we see right now. But I think it'll be like it'll be like an erosion of what we kind of thought of advertising to be, into something that's like a little bit more meaningful and actually like personal with consumers. So in that way, I kind of think of the future as being a little bit, maybe I'm taking more of a utopian view of it. And I'll actually give a shout out to our partners at Mindshare, who they do a presentation every year. They had actually done one for like the last 3 years. It was called like Media Dystopia. That's sort of about like how like we're all going through this crazy transition, and like and what might like the worst case scenario of all these things look like, to actually spinning it around to more of a utopian view and say, well, maybe we've actually seen enough of it. The world hasn't come to an end, and like where it actually could go is ultimately to a better place. I do feel optimistic that like the conversations and like the energy and the creativity of the people in this industry are strong enough still to get us to a place like that.
Yeah, certainly the commercial break, I feel like is something that I think consumers will be welcome to see go away. But yet, but it doesn't mean that we're going, I'll date myself with this one, but the old, Wayne's World product placement jokes, it's so it's blending, and how do we create those environments to where brands can engage with consumers in an authentic way, but not be, pausing for a commercial break. I certainly think there's a lot of opportunity, and in game has been a really cool environment that's seen some rise in that. But even just the way influencers and social engagements and things like that are happening today, I think, and then the blending of commerce and where that's going, like it's all it's certainly all coming together. It's I'm with you. I'm thinking of a positive outlook on where things are headed versus everything being shot at NASCAR, but looking like a NASCAR, right? How about on the audience side? We didn't touch on audience. Now, just a quick question on that, and we touched on first party data a little bit, but as you look at audience and engagement, how do you kind of flow through thought process of, we talked about reverse engineering what you want to get out of having access to that data, but arming your brand teams to think about what you want that engagement to look like before you lean in and make a particular media buy. And do you have the right data to do that? How are you guys going about that and making sure that you are filling those data gaps or voids that you might see today?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of different ways. I mean, I feel like we continue to get better at this. I mean, to me, it's a total team effort, type of a thing between, we have our agency partners, our brand teams, our media teams, our performance marketing teams, our sort of IT teams, right? We actually call them like DTS within our organization, but like there's a lot of collaboration that's kind of going on there around holistic data strategy, and we've actually launched like some other battles and initiatives within our organization as to like how we get better at that, right? Which is sort of like the future of like knowing like, okay, well, how do we start to build our audience approaches kind of like from the ground up and kind of go from there, and what are new things that we want to test, this again especially in preparation for the cookieless world, and and those kinds of things, building up identity solutions, harvesting more first party data, retail media partnerships. I mean, there's tons of things. So it really comes down to like just, having everybody engaged in the conversation, using the tools that you have to kind of like chart things out, I think, in kind of a crisp kind of data and audience strategy way, aligning those things in terms of the, environments and context that you want to like, deliver messages, right, which is going to help you be more personalized and more effective. So again, I mean, all of that stuff to me, it's like, I mean, people can feel overwhelmed about it, but it's like, this is kind of what we've really been waiting for. I mean, if you would have said that like these things that we're talking about in terms of like the capability to reach people the way that we are with the type of precision that we have, and even for like, machine learning and other things to kind of help us get even like better at it, which a lot of the DCOs and other technology partners that we work with like have the capability to help us do, if we can actually uncork it, is like, it's kind of like a nirvana. So let's just, let's be eyes wide open about what those things are, and just not sort of be like, well, that's kind of like, we'll kind of trust like one small team to kind of do that for us. Like, no, we all need to be kind of like going in and like looking at all the potential that we have and talking about what we want to do. We need our people in the organization at all levels to understand like what types of, audience targeting that we do. Because then kind of going back to your point, like, it helps you understand the experience that you're delivering if you kind of know it all the way back to the root of the data, where it's coming from, and then and therefore who you're reaching.
Yeah, your point is a really smart one. We are very data wealthy right now, or at least signal healthy and wealthy right now, as opposed to where we were just a handful of years ago. But connecting those dots is cumbersome and daunting, and those that paralyze, you're better off testing and doing and learning than doing nothing. So I had a question pop up, and kind of along that, proud of the CPG community. I know ESG has been a really important thing across our entire industry, and a lot of folks talking about it. And as we look at sustainability and diversity and inclusion and social topics, do you guys do that separately, or do you market or plan with the brand teams for how the brand is going to bring that message versus Kimberly-Clark bringing that message? And kind of just talk a little bit about that lens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are still, our brands definitely, we don't really have like a branded house type of a comms approach currently. And I don't know if we will. I mean, it's definitely like, key themes around sustainability and inclusion are absolutely pillars of our business. I mean, we launched, sort of like recent, what we would kind of call like our compass for growth, which is both of those elements are critical pillars of that. But yeah, I'd say like right now it lives more like on the brands, on the brand team side, to figure out like, how to integrate, those messages. But yeah, it definitely, I mean, to us, like, it should not be thought of as a separate bucket or a separate thing. I mean, it's doing marketing correctly, as if you're engaging in those conversations and seeking out those spaces. So the minute that you try to put like, a hard number or a target on it, or sort of treat it like it's something different, I feel like you're starting to go off the path. But you definitely should have like a mindfulness of being deliberate and intentional about how you invest in those spaces. So that's how we're encouraging our teams to work through it. And again, we've had some good successes and done some cool things in the space recently, but I still also kind of feel like we've got a lot more to go.
Yeah, healthy and makes sense. Makes sense. Let's see, we touched on all the flurry of headwinds hitting not just Kimberly-Clark, our entire industry. Inflation, supply chain costs, things going up, labor. What would you say is your most valuable lesson of staying nimble through this environment, if there is one lesson of staying nimble?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough landscape to navigate through right now. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, it's not just like the business side of it. I mean, we certainly feel the strain on, from a partnership perspective. Great Resignation has has had, an effect on many of our agency partners, has had an effect, even internally with us to some degree, right? So yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of the, staying agile, it's just about knowing, what is the greater goals that you're driving towards, right? And kind of staying focused on those and realizing that there's going to be disruption, there's going to be things that, are unexpected that kind of come up. But like, so long if we can kind of go into, every year or every quarter or every week and kind of saying like, what are still some things that we can do just to kind of get a little bit better at the areas that are matter and going to help us future proof. Let's kind of stay focused on those things and not let the other things like become too much of a distraction. And again, I think it comes down to being articulate and clear around your plan and where you need to go without, it doesn't need to be it's not over complicated. It can be like a lot of small wins like tend to add up. So yeah, I think that's what we try to, reinforce with our teams, throughout, the planning process, keep them inspired, keep them optimistic. It really does matter, I think, in terms of, because as soon as you start to kind of go into you dwell too much on what the challenges are, you start to feel stuck. And it's like, you can't let yourself get bogged down by those things, but just kind of say, all right, acknowledge that they're there, but keep your eyes focused on where you're trying to go.
Meditation and whiskey would have been acceptable answers.
That was the better answer. All right, yeah, exactly.
No, it's a great point. Listen, I'm sure these won't be the last of our challenges either, right? So, how do we, going back to the future proofing world, just prep for these and be nimble, agile, and ready to roll. Last, we got a couple of minutes here, so I'm gonna
Okay.
just before we have to go.
All right.
Having that global perspective that you do in your role with a heavily North American team and your agency here, any tips or tricks you would share for the audience on being that connective tissue for things that might be going on in EMEA or APAC or elsewhere, and bringing that insights, learning, activations? How do you share that and get some best practice learning across the org?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's a lot of things that we try to do, and I think as I've been with at Kimberly-Clark for, hard to believe, but it's coming up on 7 years, right? And I've seen an evolution, I think, in terms of how our global center works and partners with our regional teams over that time. And I won't get into the whole history of it, but I think earlier on in my tenure here, I think that there was a little bit more of a perception, and I can see like where the perception came from in some cases, that global was maybe a little bit of a shadow management or rule makers or template creators and those kinds of things. And there was a reason for some of those things to be, but like ultimately we've evolved from there, I think, especially in the area of digital disruption, digital transformation, to kind of realize that like the best thing that we can do is, if kind of like going back to my last point, if we all kind of realize what are the things that are important for us to do as an organization, and sort of like, and where are the moves that we need to make, then let's just kind of focus on supporting each other to get there. Like, and it may mean different things for different people. Everyone's going to be like on slightly different trajectories. So it kind of comes down to like, I see like, global more as support than global as police. And it's like, let's kind of talk about where it is that you want to go to and how do we help you get there faster, right? So in terms of sharing examples, I mean, there's a lot of things that we've done. I think like recently from inspiration sessions that we have, case studies that go out, but conversations, and it's really it's about connectivity and just kind of talk, let's kind of connect some of the dots between the regions. Let's share some things. Let's sort of talk about like what's worked well, what hasn't on a global basis, right? So people can kind of draw from those and sort of see like if anything that they may be able to kind of say like, I can see how that could apply to my business. Like that's a help. And then if they want to double click and go a little bit further on it, we can have a little bit more of a conversation. So yeah, I mean, I actually feel like we've become more of a globally connected community like over the last couple of years, ironically, even like during the last couple of years of the pandemic, because like we're just approaching things differently. And I think we're, and it comes from our company, like leadership on down, like we're all locked arms on where we want to go. So let's be like supportive and like help each other get there, and everybody kind of can do their part.
Thanks, Brad and Jeff. It's been great sharing those insights from Kimberly-Clark about how you're engaging with your partners and addressing the future of media with your media spend. I found it really interesting about, your desire to, follow the purchasing power of those Gen Gs and target Gen Zs. I know that KCC is a big partner of both Amazon and AWS, and looking at how we can unlock insights with both retail and Amazon advertising insights with Kimberly-Clark. So I think the future of media is in good hands at Kimberly-Clark, and really enjoyed all the insights that you provided along with Jeff.
Thank you. Appreciate that.